Welcome once again, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and for me, a particular joy to be joined once again with Claire Chase, the music director of the 2025 Ojai Festival, and one of the featured composers who I'm happy to say will be with us in Ojai, Annea Lockwood. And Annea, a particularly warm welcome to you in this virtual forum, and I can't wait until we're together.
Thank you, Ara. I can't wait for the festival to happen. It's going to be an amazing festival.
Well, our friend Claire has the most wonderful curatorial taste, so we will be in very good company. I'd actually love to, even before we go to your beginnings, Annea, love to know how the two of you came to meet, work together, and know each other. And then we'll trace it back further.
Well, I guess this is the this is the ultimate split screen, right? Like two different versions. So I say you go first, Anea.
Got in touch with me, didn't you? Asking if I'd be interested in making a piece with you. And I jumped at the chance. Of course, I've been hearing you play for years, but I didn't really know you. But it felt as if when we started talking about what we might do, it feels as if we've known each other for a very long time. We totally feel totally in sync to me, and it's a joy working with you.
Well, likewise. And I was so shy a little bit to send that email to you because I'd been a fan of yours for so long, and I was like, she's doing so many projects, and I would love to make something with you, but I didn't know if it would be of interest if you'd have time. And I feel like our fairy godmother is Pauline Oliveros. I mean, she's sort of the fairy godmother of so many musician partnerships and collaborations and friendships and beyond. But she, of course, made such a huge impression on me in my life, and I feel like even though she wasn't directly involved in our coming together creatively, somehow she got herself involved from the other realm. So I credit Pauline spiritually with this meeting.
I agree. That's pure Pauline.
Yes.
And we'll turn to a good deal of conversation about Pauline Oliveros because she'll be with us in music and in spirit in a very big way at this year's Ojai Festival. For those of you joining us who are meeting Annea for the first time, Annea was born in New Zealand, studied in the UK in part, but Annea, most of your life working and teaching has been in the United States, and in addition to a body of concert works or works for more or less standard instruments, from very early on, the world of sound and sound installation and environment has been hugely central. And I just wonder if you could take us back for a moment to your childhood in New Zealand and maybe some moments where this listening and being attuned to the sounds of nature around you somehow began to be formative. What were early inspirations?
Well, I was very lucky in that my father, who was a lawyer, was even more avidly a mountaineer and a skier, and had, when he was quite young, bought a little, we call them bach, a little cottage up in the mountains in the Southern Alps. My mother was adventurous. She loved exploring, and she passed that on to me, all sorts of exploration, and also loved to be out of doors. And so my childhood, a lot of my childhood was spent either in the Pacific or up in the Alps. And my parents, who my mother was a composer, and my father listened to music avidly. And so my parents got my brother and myself listening to natural environments, listening for birds in the bush at a very early age. I can remember lying in my bunk in that bach at night, trying to listen across the river. The batch was just right next to the little Beely River, across the river into the bush on the other side of the river where there were some kiwis hanging out to see if we could hear them. And I don't recall that we ever did, but that just stretching our ears across the river, hopefully every night when we were kids. So I was very lucky. I had focused exposure to natural environments from a very early age.
And as I mentioned, you had your many of your formal studies in England with various composers at some distinguished institutions. When did the idea of using this as source material to creating works that generate listening in a somewhat different way than standard writing for instruments, when did that begin to enter in?
It became very concentrated in my work and my attention by 1967 or so, 68, when I started working with glass as a sonic material. And my explicit aim with that was to ask people to listen to one particular piece of glass after another resonating, and listen for the fine details in the sounds which I could produce with glass, which glass itself produces. It's wonderful sonic material, very rich material. Asking people to listen to one sound gesture as if it was an entire piece of music in itself, just because of the intricacies and exquisite nature of the details in the sound. And I just sort of took off from there. It was the greatest ear training. I was doing glass concerts from, I think I did 70 of them in the end, and I was doing them from 1967, I think, through 73. So it was a nice extended period of ear training.
One of your lifelong fascinations, and Claire has recently joined you on it, is with rivers. Maybe let's jump forward, Claire, to the present, and for both of you to talk about the Elwha River in Washington, which is a river that has been undammed and allowed to return to its natural state, which is a work in process. And then once we talk about that, Annea, we can go backwards to your lifelong fascination with sound maps of rivers. But how did Claire take us through this adventure the two of you had on the Elwha River in Washington?
Well, we're continuing to have the adventure. We're in the middle of actually, not in the middle. We're in the beginning stages still of creating a piece that'll be premiered in December of this year at the Kitchen. It's called Elwha, and it is inspired by the Elwha River in the Olympic National Forest, which is one of the largest ecosystem restoration projects in national parks history. I mean, it's really an extraordinary success story, if you will, of rebirth and a restoration of a river that was so seriously compromised by these horrible, thoughtless dams. And it also is the river contains in it, and its restoration project contains in it, these unlikely partnerships between politicians, community leaders, fishermen unions, and of course, most importantly, the effort was led by the members of the Klallam tribe that have stewarded that land and that river for generations. And it's, in this world where we are so inundated with stories that are devastating, it's so wonderful to know of a story that is uplifting. And it's still very much in process. I mean, it's not like, oh, the river is restored, check. It's going to be another 100 years of work. And then, of course, tending to the restoration project will be lifetimes upon lifetimes of work for future generations. But to witness a body of water that has suffered so much, and a whole ecosystem that's suffered so tremendously, and is quite literally back on its feet, and the salmon populations are returning. It's really it's one of the most fulfilling things that I've worked on. And it was Annea's idea to listen to this river, to listen to the virtuosity of this river, and to create a piece based on its many musics. And so we are in the process of taking multiple trips out there and recording and learning from the river, learning from the people who are stewarding the river, and allowing this piece to emerge. It's a little bit weird to talk about a piece that is in its embryonic stages, but we'll do our best. I don't know, how did I do, Annea? Do you
Well,
want to take it over for me before I say too much?
Annea, I just want to say for our listeners that, as I mentioned, this lifelong love affair with rivers includes the Hudson River, the Columbia River, the Housatonic, and we'll talk about that, the Danube River. When you're encountering a river new to you, like the Elwha, what is your process? How do you interact with it? How do you get to know it? How do you learn its music? What's the process?
The process does include reading as much as I can lay my eyes on about a particular river beforehand. And while I'm still finding new books on the Elwha, which is a delight, I found a number. To begin with, there is one of the two dams before it was taken out. And what you're seeing are salmon going upstream. This is about 5 miles from the Pacific. So these are returning salmon migrating upstream, and they're about to run right up against the huge cement wall of the dam, where they butt their heads against it. They persist, they swim in circles, they stay in that area for a very long time, just unable to proceed upriver unless they're gathered up and transported up beyond the dam and replaced in the river, which is not the most satisfactory way of moving upstream. So always reading about it in advance. But I had been hearing about the Elwha from the time of the second dam came down in 2014. And I give talks about my work here and there, and I've been referring to this amazing takeout of dams on the Elwha in the Pacific Northwest as an exemplary action for a very long time, and then didn't actually encounter. It was an abstraction. It was a wonderful example of what needs to be done. It was an abstraction. And then when you and I went to the Elwha, Claire, for the first time in May, right? Late April?
May of last year, yeah.
And heard it and saw it and sat beside it and tried playing with it and talked with people, talked with tribal members, talked with people who'd lived there for a very long time about what they felt about the river and the restoration of the river. It was astonishing. It was more than three-dimensional. It's a very rich river. And I'd like to say that it's like many natural phenomena, it has tremendous resilience. So actually, the river's recovering really fast. Vegetation is moving back in the native vegetation for those areas is moving in fast, helped by local people and the tribal members planting native vegetation. I think the salmon have got up as high as 36 miles upriver, or moved within 36 miles from the mouth within the first year. And the river's only 47 miles long, so they got almost all the way up. And still trout, another trout. It shows, that river is showing tremendous resilience. And as soon as one of the major reservoirs, two big reservoirs, which of course drowned quite a bit of land, as soon as they were emptied, the river started taking its own course again, forming its own course.
Well, the sound of this river, when we first sat with it, but and really I wonder which pronoun to use for it, because this river it's such a being, right? It has, even though it has not yet been granted personhood, as some other rivers elsewhere in the world have been granted personhood, I sincerely hope that it and all rivers are granted personhood, because it is very much a being, a living being. And when we sat with this river, its sound is so tremendous. It's so ebullient. It's so bursting with life. And it isn't like we're making a piece about this river and its spirit. Like our wish is to make a piece with this river and to bring everyone into concert with it, because it's this multi-layered. I mean, it's a sound installation. It's 9 different orchestras, 17 different electronic installations and choirs, and multiple acoustic spaces mashed up. It is all of those things. And Annea's microphones, and also of course Annea's magic in the recording and composition process, captures the sound of sediment, the sound of all of these little critters, the many, many, many layers of these waters. And we've discovered just astonishing things. Like listening back to these recordings, we realized that there's quite literally a xylophone, like a xylophone with a 3.5 octave range. And I've been working on transcribing some of these recordings, just in conventional notation, to see what they are in specific pitch and rhythmic terms. Even though a lot of what we're doing is more improvisatory. And these xylophone, we're calling them xylophone licks, could have been written by by if you could make a love child between like Messiaen and Coltrane. This would be like the xylophone that is Annea's microphone going into the water and capturing the surface of the water. So, I mean, the musical material is just vast. It's endless. And we're having so much fun working on it. We actually had a session today, and I feel just like a kid in a candy store working on this piece with you.
I do. You can see why I want to work with you on this. Absolutely a joy. It's exploring that river with you is pure joy. Is exhilarating. It's life-giving.
We've got some lovely photos from your trip together that maybe this is the best moment. Just whoops, just to see the different moods and characters of the river, and there the two of you are.
We have a hydrophone in the river. We're both listening to it, checking it out. The hydrophone's attached to that pole.
Yeah, it looks like Annea's fishing, but actually she's fishing for sounds.
Right.
And listening intently, which is at the heart of it. Annea, as I mentioned, as far back as the early 80s, you did a sound map of the Hudson River, and you've come to know a number of the world's rivers well. How do their voices differ? And what are some of the qualities, just to begin to attune our listening? And how does, in this case, a rewilded river's voice differ?
I've never been able to characterize any one river as having a certain sort of sound signature, because one of the things I really love about them, which makes them truly unpredictable, is that you can move 3 yards downstream and the water flow sounds different, significantly different. Or, as in one example on the Danube, I found a great spot of where water was coiling through an intricate root system right on the bank. Found it in the evening. I still didn't have anywhere to stay for the night. I thought I'd better get that sorted out before things get much darker. Went off to get a room, thought I'll do it in the morning. It rained overnight. When I came back in the morning, the roots were entirely underwater, and the whole thing sounded entirely different. So, from one period of hours to another, and one location to another, just within a few yards, the soundscape will change. I tend not to record in the major cities, as on the Danube, for example. I ignored Bucharest, Budapest, spent a long day going around all the waterways in Vienna, which are many, and not finding very interesting sound in any of them. But once I get out of the cities, and of course we're not having that problem on the Elwha, but with the big rivers, once I get out of the cities, then I find amazing sounds, and we're finding really beautiful sounds. No, that photograph you were just the image you were just seeing of the two of us down by the riverbank fishing for sound. We were finding that was the first time we heard that xylophone like what would you call it, layer of sound. The river's total mix of layers. That was the very first time we heard it, and we both leapt at it, right?
Yeah, no, it was astonishing. And there was also, I mean, this river has so much to say that when we are out there recording and we want to listen back, it's actually very challenging because the noise floor of the river is tremendous in and of itself. So if you want to listen back to something, you know, you're not hearing in great detail, even with Annea's amazing headphones. But even with the river roaring, we heard this little sound and we both flipped out about it. But then hearing it, you know, in isolation in a quiet room, it blew my mind. I mean, just the intense musicality and versatility of this river. I mean, it's astonishing.
And then I went up a mile upriver a few days later and found a little eddy in a fairly quiet spot and rediscovered that sound, but super clear, crystal clear.
Mm.
Right?
I'm remembering too that we took turns sort of playing the xylophone, you know, dipping the microphone into the water and then slowly bringing it back out and, you know, discovering different speeds and different contours. And it was a lot of fun. I could have done that for weeks on end.
But thinking rivers have a signature, I think the Elwha I will probably come to feel it does indeed have a signature. It has steep gradients. It's 47 miles running down from the heart of the Olympic Peninsula down to the Juan de Fuca Strait. Fast. It's a fast river. I joke that it's a river that doesn't know how to be quiet. And so this one definitely has a signature of exuberant energy, huge energy, and a huge array of sounds, layers of sound. Wonderful to work on.
As Claire said, this is a new work part of the Density Project, right, Claire? That will premiere in New York in December of this year. What we will have in Ojai in June is an older work and a wonderful work, an installation of the Housatonic River, which is a 4-channel installation in a listening environment. So you'll have a chance in Ojai to hear some of Annea's work with rivers. And if the name of the river it's familiar, it's also been depicted by Charles Ives in the Housatonic at Stockbridge, although I think in Annea's piece you'll hear the actual voice of the Housatonic and not an orchestra. Another work of yours, Annea, which we will have, is very different in character. It'll be late night, a smaller event by the nature of the piece. It's an intimate piece called Spirit Catchers, which is for 4 speakers and a sound installation. Can you tell us just about how that came to be and that aspect of your work, which is very different?
Sure. It came to be as much because I moved around a lot in my first 20 to 30 years, my first 30 years, and was constantly packing and unpacking. And at a time when I was looking into traditions around ritual and ceremonies and in which trance was induced, which I was particularly interested in at the time, I kept coming across references to spirit catchers as being objects which capture a part of your being, your life, your surroundings at a particular time in your life, and which you never let go of. You never throw them out. You pack them in every time you repack and move to a new place, put them in the box and find them later and put them carefully on the side. Never lose them. They contain part of your being because, of course, they evoke memories, a huge array of memories. So in Spirit Catchers, I ask for people who have this feeling about objects, who are well aware of that experience, to bring such an object with them to the space, sit down in a sort of north, south, east, west arrangement with a mic and start letting themselves remember, let the object trigger memories, and start talking to themselves. It's a very internal process. People are letting the memories surface and recounting them to themselves, often in beautiful, soft voices. And a fifth person, myself at Ojai, mixes in a particular way. I'm bringing up one voice, bringing up the amplitude on one voice at a time, letting that voice be the top layer of sound, so to speak, not dominate exactly, but be clearly audible to the audience. The other voices are behind it, like a sort of chorus, a soft chorus. Then after a little while, I move on. I just crossfade and move to the next person, and let that voice come to the fore with whatever is being recounted. And in a couple of minutes or so, I move to the next one. And I don't necessarily stay with one person through the length of a story. I'm very likely to move on at a certain point. But over the course of about 15 minutes or so, it's about how long it usually runs. It's about how long everybody's energy and flow of memories lasts. Over the course of 15 minutes, sometimes beautiful things happen, so that you'll realize that two people sitting across from one another were actually talking about much the same thing. There was a lot of convergence without them planning it, without them even listening to one another, because the four people are asked to pay no attention to the other members of the quartet, and pay no attention when somebody else's voice comes up, just to be truly inward. But these convergences arise. So when everybody runs out of memory and out of energy, it finishes.
Yeah. And then the third work is actually on the opening night program, and it's a piece for multiple players of different instruments, and it can be for different ensembles, called Bayou Born. And it brings us back to the remarkable artist who Claire referred to at the very beginning as the fairy godmother of Annea and Claire's friendship, Pauline Oliveros. Tell us about Bayou Born. And we have an image of the map that is the genesis of this piece as well.
Bayou Born was a piece I submitted for a whole program that McGill University, a whole festival McGill University was assembling around the occasion of Pauline's 85th birthday. And they did a delightful thing. They asked 85 composers to each write a 1-minute piece. So I thought of the Bayous very quickly because of Pauline having grown up in Houston. I figured that she was she was a very independent adult. She had to have been a super independent kid. She would have been in and out of those bayous, tracking mud into the house, and just swimming, and all through her childhood. I figured she knew those bayous very well. So I dedicated the piece to her, and because of course she was a brilliant improviser, I thought the convergence of Houston, improvisation, memories, and so on would hit home. And unfortunately, much to our sorrow, Pauline died a few months before that festival could take place. McGill organized it sometime later, and it was great. However, that 1 minute, no, it was 85 seconds. It wasn't even, it was just over a minute. That's right. 85 composers, 85th birthday, 85 seconds. And I sort of thought there was more to do with the Housatonic than tear down it in 85 seconds. So it became what it is now, a piece for 6 players, varied instrumentation, each of whom is given one particular tributary, one particular bayou to read as a line, as a musical line, interpreting that line in any way which feels good to them. 6 individual voices to begin with. As the tributaries can reach a point of convergence, 2 players, for example, who will have been playing quite independently of everybody else and of one another, begin to allow their material, their musical material, to blend, and they themselves converge musically. So you start off with 6 very independent streams, so to speak, and little by little they become one massive stream as they get down towards Houston. Hurricane Harvey happened just before the first performance in 2017, which was in New York, first realization. And so, and that had been devastating to Houston. All the bayous had changed character overnight from being very sort of sensuous, laid back, placid expanses to torrential, devastating, damaging, intense flows. And we wanted to acknowledge what had happened and what people had lost and the people who'd been lost. So I asked the players to darken their tone as they get towards Houston, and it becomes more and more intense. That's Bayou Born. We've done it inside and outside. I love hearing how players realize it each time. Always different.
Well, we're
And with that
a bit different
description,
for, yeah.
I'm sorry, Claire, Fiona, if we can and finish your thought, I just wanted to see the image of the bayous again because it's visually so beautiful. But please finish your thought.
No, just to say that I love this piece and I'm so excited to do it in Libby Bowl. I think in many ways this is the ideal place for it because we have so much space to play with. We're not thinking about the staging of this taking place just on the stage. Of course, we're going to be on the lawn. Players will be behind. Players will be all around. And with the composer's blessing, we're adapting the number 6 ever so slightly and doubling up with some interesting instrumental pairings. So, for example, we'll have 2 percussion kind of acting as a unit on stage, and then 2 roving percussion out in the different bayous that will converge later, out amongst the audience and the trees and the night birds and all of that at Ojai. And we'll have the amazing Marta Tisenga on hurdy-gurdy, on her electronic hurdy-gurdy, and Wu Wei, the extraordinary Sheng player, 2 organ-like textures that have completely different tonalities. I think it's going to be so amazing to think of them as a unit, and we're imagining them positioned on opposite sides of the stage. And behind them, we have Stephen Schick and Susie Ibarra, 2 of the greatest percussionists ever, who also play very, very differently. And the percussionists who are roving out in the wilds are the extraordinary Wes Sumter and Ross Carr. And then also roving, we have 2 brass players, members of the Elysian Ensemble, trumpet and trombone, Ben Marks and Tristan Williams, and the Los Angeles-based clarinetist Josh Rubin. So it's kind of a dream team. And we decided to double up on the instrumentation because of the size of the space, and also because we have all these amazing people, and why not hear them play together in combinations that they've never played in before. So I'm so excited to hear this piece. I think it's so moving. And I'll say just quickly about Spirit Catchers too, Annea. I saw your performance of that at Eflux in Brooklyn, and I live in Brooklyn. I'd never been to this venue before. It's actually not that far from my house. I heard it was like a very cool venue, but I'd never been there before. I showed up, the place was absolutely packed. I could not find a seat. Everyone was there to hear Annea Lockwood do Spirit Catchers. I mean, I really I felt like I was at the hippest event in New York. And it was only the composers there that I recognized. I didn't recognize any of the audience members. I was like, where do these people come from? I felt very old. It was an unbelievable performance. And you weren't doing the sound diffusion that night. I'm so happy you're going to be doing that at Ojai. You were one of the speakers. And it was tremendously moving. And
Adrian Blue, who's a brilliant record producer who runs a great vinyl store on East 7th, wonderfully plays in bands. He's a marvelous musician and very sensitive. Adrian,
yes,
was the perfect diffuser. The perfect.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I thought in that moment, we have to do this piece at the Ojai Music Festival. It's such an Ojai piece. And I'm so happy that we're doing it late night also. It'll be its own event. Nothing else around it. Of course, there will have been a very full day, as there always is at Ojai, but it will have space around it, and those sounds and stories will send us into the night. So I'm so happy we're doing it.
So fortunate to have both those pieces in your hands, in the hands of the musicians who'll be realizing them. Super fortunate. Can't wait to hear those manifestations of those pieces.
I'd love to just use the remainder of our time to talk about the wonderful spirit who joins you in very different ways and experiences. Pauline Oliveros, whose music has been at the festival in past years, in part with Claire's involvement and ICE in 2016. And Annea, you get pride of place. You had such long and early history with Pauline. How did you come to meet, and how did your relationship evolve over the years?
My belief is we've known each other since the late 60s. And I think we encountered each other in the pages of Source, Music of the Avant-Garde, which was this wild, beautifully produced magazine about experimental music. Was thoroughly experimental in itself. And Pauline was publishing the first sonic meditations in Source, as I recall, and I published Glass Concert, the score for Glass Concert. And we encountered each other's work, and it was, for me at any rate, it was such a powerful recognition of a kindred spirit. We got to know each other, and within, let's see, about 5 years, my partner, Ruth, I was living with Ruth Anderson, composer, and my partner for many, many, many years. And Ruth and Pauline had known each other for a very long time, much longer than my acquaintance with Pauline. So Pauline was really a part of our lives. Pauline introduced Ruth and me to each other, which she did for many, many, many people, many couples. It was Pauline and Ione who went up to Canada, after going up to Canada to get married, looked at Ruth and me and said, well, why did you do that? It's not a bad idea. So at her instigation, we did. But Pauline was an absolutely crucial friend to me, especially in those last years in the UK, and would send over the sonic meditations. I and my friends, Hugh Davies and others, would gather together and do them and tell her what it had been like. We did the telepathy piece. We did, that was Alvin, I think, in Rome. Or no, it was Alvin Lucier at Wesleyan, and ourselves in the UK, a little cluster of about a dozen of us, and Pauline and co in California, very sure that we were communicating telepathically, in fact. The sonic meditations were a revelation, of course, as those works which have followed them have been life-changingly revealing, revelatory, and for many, many people still are, which is wonderful to see, very much so. And for us, absolutely. They were rich thing. They were rich training. They were just, even then, were very rich training. And then Pauline was a friend. And I love to say of her that she was a trickster. That's not always recognized, but she really was. She was a hayoka. Much a trickster. And I love that about her too. So there were these many sides to that woman from Houston. She was much beloved
And Claire, we have a lovely video that you had a hand in with Ross Carr and producing, which captures a few moments with Pauline very beautifully. But before we watch that, when did you first encounter Pauline, and what was sort of the shape of your relationship together working?
Well, Pauline liked to call me a deep listening baby because my first encounter with her was actually, I kid you not, prenatal, because my mother was in her extended vocal techniques group at UCSD. And so I was doing deep listening and doing extended vocal techniques and sonic meditations when I was in my mama's belly. So my relationship with her goes back as far as it possibly could. I have these fond, wonderful memories of her when I was a kid, you know, and she was a professor at UCSD, her playing her accordion barefoot. I mean, she just was this astonishing free spirit that even before I, got to know her well personally, made such an impression on me. I reconnected with her when she came as a guest faculty member at Oberlin for a semester, and I sheepishly asked her if she would write a piece for my trio. It was a flute, cello, piano trio with two founding members of ICE, Phyllis Chen and Kivikon Lipman. That group actually became the sort of seed for International Contemporary Ensemble when we founded the group a year later. And so Pauline, you could say, really was like the Opus One piece that was written for ICE when we were just a little seedling of an idea. And she wrote this astonishing piece called Elemental Gallop, which is actually in her text anthology now. And it just it was a jumping off point for basically everything that I did after that point. She said to me when I told her that I had this idea to start this group, this collective of musicians and digital media artists and producers and educators, and we didn't want to have any lines between any of these roles. She said, Claire, I love this idea. I'm going to be on your advisory board. And I was like, what's an advisory board? She's like, you need one. So I'm going to be on it. And then if I'm on it, other people get on it. And so, she just was looking out for me, just mama from day one. And so, I formed an advisory board, and our founding advisory board member was Pauline Oliveros. It was really easy to get other people to join once she had done that. So, and then our relationship deepened year after year. And she wrote so much music for the group and for me. And, yeah, I mean, it's hard to overstate the influence and the import. And I'm
But
one of tens of thousands of musicians that she influenced,
the video we're about to see is particularly touching in several dimensions. One, there's a direct Ojai connection in that some of the clips of performance take place at Meditation Mountain, the Ojai, during the 2016 Ojai Festival. But what's touching is also Pauline working with ICE in preparation for those events. And what were to be some of the last work she was to do before she left us. And so it's incredibly moving to see her eternal vibrancy and youth in action at that moment in her life. So this is a video, I believe, Claire, made by Ross Carr, who is with
Yes.
us, who will be with us as a percussionist and projectionist at Ojai this summer.
A good way to begin is take a breath and begin. And it's good to listen to the sound of the hands moving. Nice sound. Good and warm. So now just hold back and you notice the sensation going between the palms of the hands. Okay, so we're going to bring the palms to the cheeks. Okay, and we're going to rub up and down 36 times, and I'll do the count for that. And it'll be pretty vigorous. So here we go. Ready? 1, 4, 5, 9, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay? And then just gently across the scalp 3 times, like this. And then I'll show you this place. The 3 fingers on the cerebellum. I'm going to do flicking the index finger down to tap underneath the cerebellum. This is called knocking at the gate of heaven. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Everybody okay? Nobody got hurt? All right. So we're going to sit down and do our meditation now. It's quite beautiful, but it has a tendency to shorten up. Because there's more juice to get out of this, you know. And but if you hold back and don't give, then it doesn't go where it could go. So that's my comment on that. And I think you just have to be more sure that you're right, because you are. Okay, that's some really beautiful sounds in there, and I think that it can have more dynamic range, and you can also let your romantic soul go a little bit more. Play, warmly. Yeah. Give it some juice. So you establish your unison, D, with the player opposite you in the circle. So each player has a partner with a like instrument. And you deviate slightly from the unison D, and you listen for beat frequencies as you slide very gradually on it, or in microtonal steps, either toward D sharp or D flat. So listening for the beat frequencies is really the key to this thing about deviating. I think you have to buck your training. You really do. You really have to buck that classical training, where you're playing in tune. By golly, right? But what's delicious is when when those beats start. I mean, it's really beautiful. At least it is for me. I like it a lot.
And we have, I can't resist, we have a minute to see a clip of Pauline playing accordion, which is how I first experienced her many, many, many years ago at Beyond Baroque in Venice. Just a solo performance of Pauline playing accordion. So Fiona, if we can have that. That's an excerpt from a performance at Roulette in Brooklyn, I think filmed in 1995, which you can find online. And by the way, one other fantastic treasure that Claire led me to that we can send a link to in a follow-up email to all of you if you're curious, is a 1972 conversation between Annea and Pauline that was happily recorded and lives in the archives online. So you can hear both of these two remarkable creative spirits in conversation with each other. We will have two works of Pauline Oliveros at Ojai. The Witness, which will be a kind of collective experience on the Sunday evening closing program, and Horse Sings from the Cloud, which will be at a free concert at Ojai Valley, Ojai Meadows Preserve on one of the early mornings, open to the whole community. And Claire, maybe you can actually tell us the very simple but remarkably fruitful and profound instruction for what sets off Horse Sings from the Cloud.
Yeah, Horse Sings from Cloud. It goes like this. This is the whole score. Sustain one or more tones or sounds until any desire to change the tones or sounds subsides. When there's no desire to change the tones or sounds, then change. And that's it. And Pauline's rendition of this, I mean, she's done it many, many, many times, but her sort of iconic rendition of this you can find on YouTube. If you just search Horse Sings from Cloud, Pauline Oliveros accordion. It's about a 40-minute solo improvisation on the piece that she did where she plays the accordion and sings. And it's one of the most beautiful and remarkable moving performances recorded ever. I love it so much. We're going to do it in a version at this beautiful preserve with two flutes, clarinet, saxophone, percussion as the kind of glue to get the thing going. And then we're going to invite everybody in the audience who wishes to join along. I'm really excited about that. Of course, the birds will be as loud as we are at that time in the morning. So, you know, they'll be doing their version of the score as well.
And I mentioned to Annea when we were speaking before we joined everybody that one of the most wonderful organizations in Ojai is the Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, which happily has bought and saved and created the use of the Ojai Meadows Preserve. And one of their big initiatives is called Rewild Ojai, which I highly recommend to everyone, which is as a land trust purchasing land that might otherwise be developed for other purposes and restoring it to its natural vegetation and natural state. So, Annea, we can't wait to welcome you to Ojai, because I think you will find it a very conducive environment to you and your work.
I think I won't want to leave. You'll have time moving me afterwards. It
We
sounds
all have that problem when we visit Ojai.
We are, alas, pretty much at the end of our hour together. As always, talking with each of you and both of you is a very happy and never-ending process of discovery and a lot of joy.